Before we get into the video, I want to apologize if anything seems weird while watching. My graphic card is failing and I can only do what I can to save it. It will take a long time before I can get a new graphics card, but if you'd like to help curb the tide a bit, I do have a Patreon, which you can donate $1 a month to. And to be honest, I don't have much of an incentive for anyone to give $1, except that without a new graphics card, I can't explore Lost Ark or WoW Classic until I get a new one. So, if any of my 10k subs want to help out with that, all I can promise is that WoW Classic will get the same treatment as my new player experience retail WoW video. And also Lost Ark, because that game looks very interesting. But thank you nonetheless, whether you become a Patreon or not, because just watching my videos help a ton in the long run. But again, if you'd like to help with this graphic card issue, there are links in the description. Not to mention, I'll kiss the foot of all my contributors. All of them. All of them. Josh Drive Hayes has a wall, why not me? Now, let's get to the video. So, how do I begin the story about the Omicrons? Well, at first we had no idea what they were called until Endwalker, and our first encounter with them was our very own Omega. Omega came here because he was chasing after some dragon from the stars people were waging war against. This dragon is our very own dragon dad, Midgardsimer, who was also here because he needed an extended vacational picnic stay here on Heidelin with his 7 unborn children. And when I say picnic, I mean the last bastion of life in the universe, apparently. This is not a hyperbolic statement. I really mean that. The last bastion in the universe is apparently our star, now known as Heidelin. Oh, and if I didn't say spoilers yet, yeah, there's spoilers in this video. Aetheris was the name of the star before Heidelin came through, but you know, she had to be narcissistic and name it after her new elder primal self. Okay, lady, that's a little bit of an ego. Omega was the second one to arrive on our star some eons ago, following Midgardsimer on his way, trying to escape the destruction of his own star, brought about by the Omicrons. Yeah, so these little troublemakers had a kind of paranoid moment while they were evolving and came to this assumption that if they conquer the universe first, then no one will ever threaten them. I mean, they're right. I can't really argue with that kind of logic if that's what they were going with. You see, they were at threat from other races on their star, and at first they defended themselves by upgrading their bodies, replacing parts that they deemed replaceable. They replaced their limbs, appendages, bodily functions, all up until they just plumbed through their whole body away for a robotic one, and then they just digitized their minds, becoming nothing but automatons that have souls, I guess.
Our kind did not always work as they do now. Long ago, we possessed frail and feeble bodies. Beleaguered by stronger races, our ancestors took to augmenting their flesh in order to defend themselves. What began with limited parts eventually spread to the whole body, and at last, a means was discovered to convert the mind into data, rendering even the brain obsolete.
The history of the Omicron is actually quite simple. They were threatened and they had to adapt, but along the way they lost what it meant to be a living organism. They became so powerful that the dragon, the so-called strongest race, were not even a match for them. They ultimately became what they wanted, conquerors, bringing low all manner of races under their heel, but at a huge cost. They had gone to war for so long that they lost their star in the process. Like, even Omega was trying to contact home a couple times, and all he got was the AOL dial-up sound.
We're sorry, you have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service.
Let's talk about Omega for a little bit. The giant hunk of metal came from space a long time ago following Mid-Daddy. The problem, however, was that McGartzmer relinquished his former power as a means to make a pact with Heidelin. This pact was to protect a waterfall, which got blown up anyway. You had one job, you couldn't even do that? Well, as soon as Omega landed, he was found by the Alligans and thus was repurposed into a war mech for the Alligans to control. Also, it was because of Omega that the Alligans got a major boost in tech points. Like, they went from ether chemistry to super ultra mega ether chemistry. It's not that big of a deal. Omega, however, was only buying time. With his quarry no longer a threat, he only needed time for self-repairs to go through, and he could return to his home star, but something caught his eye. After being awakened and used to fight Shinryu, an adversary worthy of its attention, Omega decided to open a chemical bath that led into a rift between dimensions. Not really sure how he did it though, that's still a question mark. I have no idea how he did this. This was one of Omega's unique abilities compared to the other Omicrons, where they could build a base on another world in like a day. Omega could tear open a rift in the void in like a second. Okay, so I have a theory here, so just hear me out. Okay, so I'm sure some of you saw this video I made some years ago. You know, the one about how Omega is actually a shade of an original Omega that has been traversing the interdimensional rift looking for its quarry, which was Chaos, but then changed its target to Shinryu due to it absorbing Chaos and blah blah blah. Well, here's an update on that. I theorize that this Omega may have some connection with the original. Remember, traversing the interdimensional rift has an effect on both time and space. Like having an entire world being replicated into the rift and being called World B, or how the events of Dissidia actually lasted over an unprecedented amount of time, years theoretically, and yet the warriors do not age and return as they were when they were scooped up in the first place. Well, what if Omega entered the interdimensional rift, played a part in what happened in World A from Final Fantasy I, perhaps also appearing there as a machine developed by a warring nation, followed Chaos into the rift after events conspired, experienced events from other worlds within the Final Fantasy series, watched the events of Dissidia from a distance, created an area to conduct the final test by recreating the entities it observed, and started its test of the 90 participants plus you, the Warrior of Light from Antheris, and kicked off the events that unfolded. But hey, it's just a theory. I might be sued if I said that. Anyway, Omega does show what could be the pinnacle of Omicron potential. Having the ability to create things out of nothing, it tried to recreate all manner of entities, including Alpha, the small chocobo, or Chaos, the last boss in Final Fantasy I. Having this ability means that the Omicrons were searching for a way to evolve even further beyond. You see, they came to a point where nothing, and I mean nothing, threatened them anymore, thus losing a purpose to exist. On Ultima Thule, the pathfinding unit had conceded to have all citizens just wander and do mundane tasks until their power supplies were all depleted, finding no threat and seeing no purpose in functioning. Omega had similar functions, though it tried to find strong entities, observe how they were strong and why, then assimilate that power and evolve to become stronger. Unfortunately, when it came to observing us, the Warriors of Light, we had something Omega could not understand. Being a full machine made it impossible for it to understand why living beings could perform feats of miracles when stressful and impossible tasks were placed before them. This miracle power Omega could not understand was later defined as Dynamis, something we players of Endwalker know all too well. Dynamis, in short, is an energy related to one's emotion. Energy that can be used depending on one's emotion, which allows them to exhibit what some would say impossible feats. Dynamis is a product of strong emotions, but it cannot be seen nor touched. An almost unknown energy within the universe. You ever heard of a mother lifting a car because her baby was trapped under it? I think that's Dynamis. That might be Dynamis. Or a dad fighting off a bear because they were attacking their dog. Yeah, that might also be Dynamis. Anyway, it was because of this unknown energy that players are able to overcome huge threats with spikes of power. We know them as limit breaks. Omega could never understand something like that, as Dynamis isn't something seen or felt and cannot be calculated. Sort of. Another theory here, I think this form might have been the closest we were ever going to get as to what the Omicrons would have looked like if they kept their fleshy bodies. Not sure why they're hot though. The Omicron gave up almost everything it meant to be alive in a natural sense. They had no strong emotion to speak of, though they did show proof that they still exhibit some irritation or anger or some small little emotion. The Omicrons do have emotions, we just sometimes forget that. We have to remember that even though they are robots, they do have emotions. It is proven that they can show a form of compassion. When visiting one of the level 90 dungeons, the Stigma Dreamscape, some Omicron rebelled against invading other planets. That rebellion didn't last long, by the way, but it did prove that deep down, they had souls. But even still, this would not stop the walking Terminators from invading other worlds and eventually coming to an end of their own journey. Think we were from the future here, just wanted to let you know that I apologize because I got that one wrong. The Omicron world was not destroyed by war, but by the Omicron themselves. They excavated their world to the point where the world's resources was all dried up. Thus, the rebellion. One side wanted to save the world, the others wanted to go and invade other worlds for their resources. Their reason for invading is twofold, to prove that they are the strongest in the galaxy and to protect themselves, and the other half is because they have no resources to pretty much do anything. They kind of destroyed their own world, so yeah, sorry about that. Having nothing left to live for and detecting no more threats within their space, the Omicron just continued functioning with no star to return to due to the constant conflict, presumably being the cause of the loss of their star. Omega, possibly being one of the only Omicrons left, was defeated by us, and yet during the finale, it could be assumed Omega finally learned what it was missing from its evolution, fading away as any other soul entity would. The Omicrons was a race of beings that upgraded and evolved through artificial means, eventually throwing away everything it meant to be naturally alive in order to be the strongest entities in their space, only to fall short as to what it meant to be alive like all living things. They lost their sight when they decided to throw away their natural flesh and became almost soulless, though they aren't without hope. The Omicron still exhibits soul-like personalities, and if all Omicron had the ability to reshape and evolve themselves like Omega, do you think that perhaps they could have found a further purpose much like Omega did? Well, all I know is that I'm sure there are some stragglers out there in the universe, and who knows if any of those metal potatoes will plop down here on Etheirys. But the Omicron do tell a tale. If you've defeated all enemies and have given up everything to be the strongest, then what is there next to do? What is the purpose of being the strongest if nothing threatens you no more? What is the point of fighting? What am I fighting for? If there is nothing left to fight, then what do I do now?
We were successful in that endeavor. So powerful did we become, we could lay low even the mighty dragons. But then something unexpected happened. I began experiencing an error. I could no longer determine an optimal path.